We've all heard the stories. My kid is self-harming, or my child is experiencing severe panic attacks. And as we listen to these accounts, we often express silent gratitude that we haven't been confronted with such heart-wrenching situations ourselves. But it's hard to fathom the pain of witnessing our own child, no matter what their age, going through deep emotional trauma and feeling helpless to provide the support they need. However, what if you find yourself as that parent? What if you're the one faced with these daunting challenges? My guest today is Dan Peterson, a licensed professional counselor and coach who for the past 25 years has worked in a variety of settings with children who have complex emotional and behavior problems. We'll unpack what he's learned in his journey of helping parents facing similar issues, drawing from his own experiences in supporting his own son who suffers from anxiety. Thank you for being here, Dan. This is going to be a great podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get started and share anything that's going to be helpful to you and to your audience.
You know, as a pediatrician, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I will honestly say in the first 10 years of my practice, I didn't see much anxiety or depression in kids. And then the second 20 years, I saw it begin to rise. But in the past 5 years, it seems like it's just gone through the roof. As a matter of fact, in my practice, it's gotten so prevalent that our counselors are full, our psychiatrists are full. And a lot of times it ends on me to help these kids, and I'm not a trained counselor. And so it's a very, very uncomfortable position. But you talk about the necessity of parents making a conscious effort to stay connected with our kids, even when they can't be fully present in every aspect of their lives. Talk to me about what you mean by connection.
There's a lot of ways that you can connect to your kids, but I'm talking about being emotionally connected, physiologically connected, neurologically connected, by being fully present and having like a set of tools on how to do that in a way where the kid feels seen, valued, and noticed. Like most of the parents I work with are high performing parents that are very busy, have a ton of things on their mind, very anxious themselves. And what's interesting is their kids find that having problems is a good way to create extra connection. And because when our kids are struggling, when they're misbehaving, when they're being annoying, it demands attention, demands our presence, it demands a higher amped up version of us. And although it's through negativity and conflict, kids are really resilient to figure out ways to get on our radar.
Well, and unlike adults, they can't just come to you and say, oh, I just feel really terrible. I think I'm getting depressed. I think I'm anxious, Mom. I don't know what to do. And what I've found in kids, I don't know if I'd be curious to see what you say, is that anxiety and depression often come out sideways. You know, kids will act obnoxious, or they'll go hurt the dog, or they'll go, be mean to their sister or something. So how can a parent recognize signs of disconnection with their kids?
First, just speaking about coming out sideways, that's actually language that I use with a lot of the parents, that when kids are feeling sad or anxious or nervous, if they're not able to fully process that and express that, they internalize it and then it comes out sideways. And usually it's acting out or negative behavior. But what we do inadvertently as parents all the time is we inadvertently communicate that I'm uncomfortable with those uncomfortable emotions. I don't know what to do with them. Let me try to fix them and go away. And unfortunately, what happens for kids is when they are anxious or depressed or sad or scared, and they get the message that my parents can't handle those emotions or they want them to go away, they disconnect. But then when it comes out sideways, the seeking for connection and help is still there. So it's obnoxious, it's annoying, it's defiance. What one of my kids, what he's really notorious about doing is he'll just start all this negative self-talk, which is code for there's something going on, please pay attention and help me, but I don't know how to articulate it. And I'm not sure if you're here and you have time and you're able to tolerate it.
How old is he?
He's
Just out of
11 now.
curiosity. Okay. What can parents do with their kids to begin that connection process? Because I think a lot of parents know the language, but they really don't know how to connect, as you said, emotionally and physiologically with their kids. So where do they start? Can you give them 3 places where they can start to get this connection?
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
So I like to think in threes. When we talk about connection, we're talking about how do you connect to your kid in a way that's going to build them up on the inside so they feel valued, seen, noticed, their confidence and esteem goes up. But at the same time, you have to be very conscientious to not connect to the problems. Because if you inadvertently connect to the problems, what you're doing is you're saying, this is when and how I see you. And kids translate that to, that must be who I am. And when kids...
So I'm gonna stop you there. What do you mean? What's the difference between connecting with the kid and connecting with the problem?
It's one and the same. Kids, the behavior is the bid for your connection.
Okay.
So for example, let's say your kid's being annoying. If you tell them to stop, if you redirect them, if you give them those, I don't know how your audience feels about this, but those stupid countdowns. 5, 4, 3.
Guilty.
Yeah. Well,
Guilty.
I work a lot.
I know.
I work a lot in schools, and teachers do that all the time. But nobody ever goes from 5 to 1.
Yeah.
It's always 5, 4, 3. 2 3/4, 2, and then they repeat them.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts.
Because we don't know what else to do. So go ahead. Yeah. So go ahead.
So the bid for the connection is the kid's behavior. Our decision on what we connect to, whether it's the good behavior or the bad behavior, is really how we choose to connect and get those needs met. So like the kind of the 3-legged stool that I operate from is, how do you intentionally connect to things you want more of? How do you become super self-aware and self-controlled to not inadvertently connect to problems? And then if discipline is needed, how do you do that in a way that teaches skills and accountability versus like punishment, shame, and frustration? But like specifically to how do you connect to the positivity, I like to have parents start with just identifying 3 to 5 of their core values, things that are really important to them as far as character traits. Just out of curiosity, if you were to answer that question, what are maybe 3 to 5 character qualities that are really important to you?
Character qualities? Integrity is important to me, to teach kids to tell the truth and be honest. I think perseverance, to learn to not give up and to just kind of plow through those things. For me, it's faith. So I think, I think every courage, buddy sort of picks their own. But to me, when my husband and I were raising our kids, we felt very strongly about how we talk to one another, and that kids had to speak to one another in as respectful a manner as possible. They couldn't swear. They couldn't say mean things. They couldn't call certain names. And that seemed to work. So that's my answer.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. So let me break down the whole talking in a respectful way. When I ask parents and teachers this question for the first time, they all say the same thing. What generally prompts you to have a conversation with your kids or with students about respect? What kind of triggers that conversation?
Disrespect.
Yes. and
the kid just walloped the other guy on the head.
Or you talk about honesty right after they were being dishonest. And generally, and I was super guilty about this before I learned about a specific approach called Richard Hart that we can talk about in a minute if you want. But generally, we teach respect right after kids were disrespectful. And I don't know about you, but I haven't really met a whole lot of kids that are super open to your words of wisdom while they're being disciplined.
Oh, no.
And so the time to connect with respect and talk about respect is when you have real-time evidence of it happening. So I see that you're frustrated, you're irritated, your brother just walloped you. You didn't respond. That took a ton of self-control. Or you asked before you got on your Xbox. That's being really respectful and showing a high level of integrity. When you start to connect to your kids, when they're showing those traits, 2 things happen. One, they start to believe that that's the type of person they are because you just provided evidence. And number two, they're getting that deep connection from you in a way that's going to help build them up versus tear them down or confuse them with, I get what I need, but it's usually when I'm being a pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that if somebody came along to me as an adult and said, wow, I see that you're, a very hard worker and that's so admirable, that makes me feel like the person
Yeah.
more because they said something nice to me. It makes me feel good and it makes me continue to be a hard worker. But on some level, it does make you closer to that person when they applaud what your good qualities are and quit saying no on your bad qualities. A lot of times parents will complain and say, all I say to my child is no, no, no. And I send them in my room and I send them to their room and I send them to their room, but they keep repeating the same thing over. How do you coach those parents?
Yeah, you're pretty much speaking the language of every parent that's in my office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So my first thing is, how is that working for you?
Mhm.
And that one
Yeah,
parent says
not.
it's working great. That's why I'm here, just to let you know. So there's a couple things that you're always having to balance. One is the timing of what you're connecting to and what you're saying more of. If you're constantly saying don't or stop or no, what you're saying is, this is how I see you. I see you as a kid that doesn't
Mhm.
listen, that doesn't respond to authority, that it constantly needs to be just, and they don't know this, but parents are inadvertently sending the message that you're a problem, you're disrespectful, you're irritating, you're annoying. And then when kids believe that, they respond in a way that's congruent with
They
that.
become that.
So
Mhm.
the alternative to that is proactively building a different narrative for the kid. You are respectful, and I will not work on discipline with a family until they master the skill first, because the kid has to
Mhm.
trust that the parent sees and believes them in a different light before they're willing to start managing their own behavior. And I don't know about you, but what I've found is when parents get this energy exchange down, where they start to really get good about seeing moments where things are going well and they attach character and there's a ton of connection around that. And at
Mhm.
the same time, when kids are being annoying, they're really kind of low powered and very disinterested and not connecting in high levels. Kids' behavior improves as a result of that, because they start to see that I'm getting what I need, what I want from my family, from my
Mhm.
parent. I believe that that's who I am. So when I kind of step out of line, I start correcting my own behavior.
Mm.
And when parents start to kind of experience an improvement in behavior, not because they came up with some great consequence or some amazing discipline strategy, that's what they're after anyway. They don't want to micromanage their
Right.
parent or their kids.
Right.
Now that doesn't, yeah,
You know, I'll-
and just
yeah.
one other piece, that doesn't mean that kids won't still misbehave and still need discipline, but unless you get those first two pieces down first, discipline is just going to be really laborious. You're going to get very minimal improvement from it. And it's going to be a lot more exhausting and irritating for the parent.
Well, I think it's exhausting and irritating for the kids as well. And one of my concerns is that saying no to kids over and over and over, it leads them to believe they're a bad kid. And it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Talk to us about personality versus externalizing behavior. For instance, we had 4 kids, very different personalities. My oldest daughter was very bossy until she was, early teens. And I see her daughter doing a lot of the same thing. And so, but then the second kids have been, easygoing. Is any of that inherited, or is my daughter using the same parenting of her daughter that I did with her? We're just laying it out there because it's really hard. It's hard as a parent to know what part of their personality, for instance, having a very strong will and making sure they're in charge and making sure their siblings are doing things right. Or are they a kid who's really anxious and sort of working in it out that way? How does a parent discern between a personality quirk and a real behavior problem?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
can they?
so this is my thought on that. I don't know that it really matters. whether it's something they're born with
Mm.
or something they're intentionally doing or not, because your response is going to be the same. If you're highly motivated and highly invested in building your kid up and helping them see that this intensity they have, let's call it personality, or let's just call it stubbornness or intentional or
Mhm.
unintentional, like it doesn't matter. What matters is you learn how to manage yourself and you learn that you have really unique gifts. What I like to do is, or what I like to say is, if your kid is impulsive, can you discern if that is within their control or is that just straight like incompetence? I've never had a
Mhm.
parent say, I know 100% of the time that it's incompetence or 100%, like they
Right.
don't know. So
It doesn't
yeah, so
matter.
it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter, but how you respond is going to be the same regardless.
When you have kids, again, this is something I didn't see a whole lot of in the first 15 years of my practice. And then it's just sort of seems like it's grown in prevalence. But a lot of kids who are antsy, acting out, constantly on the move, constantly confrontational, won't really listen to anybody. And I've seen these kids in my office, and I will tell you, I like all kids, but I've had a kid in there that sometimes I'm having a hard time being with you because you're acting really obnoxious. Um, they're jumping off my table and they're hitting the walls and they're interrupting their parents. Talk to us about that because that's a pretty common behavior as far as any kind of pathology.
Yeah, you're describing 90% of the kids that I represent. You know, those are the
Mhm.
similar problems that most of the parents who work with me are reporting. I kind of have a unique way of looking at this. I'm not real big on ADHD, ODD, elemental PEQ, or STV, like whatever you want to say, because it's
Mhm.
so hard to
Yep.
really get clear,
Labels.
right? I
Yep.
view
Yep.
it through
Yep.
this lens of intensity. For whatever reason, these
Mhm.
kids are more intense. They seek deep connection and they get deep connection in ways that other kids would never, ever even think of. And it's
Mhm.
our job to help them manage that intensity in a way that's going to be their strongest asset rather than something that's going to deteriorate a relationship they have. The kids that are in your office or in my office that are super annoying, if you look at it through the
Mhm.
lens, and trust me, there's lots of them.
Sorry, audience, but this is what our job
Well,
is. Yeah.
I work at a
Yeah.
behavioral health hospital. So when I run groups, I have 12
Okay.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
them.
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so what I see is these are kids that have this intense need to connect. And this is just the lens I use. And they have learned that the adults are extremely responsive and amped up and the more annoying, the better, because it stops you
Mm.
in your track and demands your attention. Now, looking at it through this demand for connection and attention, man, these kids are extremely resilient at getting their needs met. They will
Mm.
burn any bridge, do anything possible because that need for connection is so intense that
Mm.
it leads them towards getting what they want, which is the time, attention, connection with the adult. Unfortunately, when it comes to annoying behavior, it tears them down on the inside because it communicates that you're
Mhm.
bad. And then you have
Mhm.
more anxiety, you have more impulsivity because internally, I get what I need when I'm bad. That doesn't make any sense. Nobody likes me. Everybody's irritated, but I'm the center of
Mhm.
attention. Like what an internal
Mhm.
chaos that is.
Yeah.
So good luck to making an accurate diagnosis that that's true impulsivity or anxiety when you have kids operating that.
Yeah. I have found because a lot of times I get parents who come in and say, the teacher says that my child has ADD or ADHD and wants me to, talk to you about medication. The kid's in fifth grade, sixth grade, whatever. And my belief that my experience has showed me, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but a lot of times, quote, ADHD will not really be an attention issue at all. It might be depression. It might be a learning issue. It might be anxiety because no kid can sit still in class reading a book if they have dyslexia. They're up and all over the place. So my bias is that we medicate much too quickly. Give me your thoughts on medicating kids who are ADHD.
Are like presumed to have ADHD or have a true accurate diagnosis of ADHD?
True accurate diagnosis. True accurate. They've been tested and gone
Yeah.
through different, yeah.
My personal professional stance is very similar to you. I believe kids are way over medicated and it's the front line to treatment and it should be the last line. After we've done thorough assessment testing to make sure that we really know this is ADHD, whether that's through brain imaging or neuropsychological testing, something that's given us real accurate data and can weed out the rest. So if we know it's true ADHD, in my opinion, and you've tried lots of different interventions, including the coaching that I do, and it's still not getting the results, that's a sign that they need medication.
Yeah.
I think we use it way too frequently, though. That's the problem.
Yeah, I agree because it works. I mean, you can take somebody who doesn't have it; it'll still kind of blunt them and bring them down a bit. Now, you've been talking about a troubled child or kid acting out, maybe just your healthy run-of-the-mill great kid who's acting out and fighting with their siblings and so forth, and how to, rather than just say no, how to sort of preempt it and give them encouragement and positive feedback when they're doing things correctly. What do you do? And I see this as well. What do you do with the parent who over-talks to their kid and is saying, okay, you're 4. Tell me how you feel before you want to hit your brother and talk to me about that. And then sometimes they focus so much on getting the kid to talk about their feelings that the kids express those feelings. And I think sometimes parents get a little bit duped in being too permissive with their kids because they say, well, I'm not going to give you any rules. I'm not going to set any boundaries because you're going to find your way, because I'm going to teach you how to express yourself and then you'll do the right thing. I hope I'm making sense to you. Do you ever see parents and kids like that?
Yeah, I would say that's probably not as common as the kid that's acting out and the parents lecturing them all the time or threatening them all the time. But in my experience, when parents are not holding their kids accountable, they're robbing them of the natural cause and effect of making mistakes, learning new information, and being able to adjust and level up with the behavior. I think when your kid makes a mistake and they're held accountable for that, they actually learn to respect that boundary. And at the same time, they develop more confidence in themselves because they're learning to master self-control. Without that feedback loop, like, how do kids learn to accept accountability? How do they learn from mistakes? How do they learn to have, like a big letdown and not let it destroy their self-confidence or their view of themselves?
Right.
So accountability is really important in my part.
What I'm thinking of is, I recently had a patient who was 5 going into kindergarten, and I was asking questions of her and her dad. I was asking questions of her and she'd answer, and then her dad would add something to it. Oh yeah, but I see this. And she literally said to her dad, "Shut up, Dad." And my eyes almost popped out of my head. And Dad just sat there. And I said to him later, without the child around, why do you accept that? And he said, well, I really feel it's self-expression is important. And so I think it's you got to find that balance between teaching your child self-expression, but also honoring certain boundaries. And it seems to me that that's a hard thing for parents to do, is to find that balance.
Sure. And just to kind of distinguish between healthy expression and verbal abuse. Maybe that might help that father kind of view that, yes, there is a healthy expression and here's what it looks like. There's also expression that's unhealthy, and that's verbal abuse, that's talking down, that's backstabbing, that's gossip. All those things that, if an adult was to talk to him that way, he probably wouldn't tolerate.
You're right. Talk about consequences. So, because kids, you can talk to them and explain to them, saying "shut up" to me is very inappropriate. You have to respect me. Don't do that again. what would be an appropriate consequence for a 5-year-old who said to their dad, "Shut up"? Or how would you, or would you not give them a consequence? Just explain it to
Yeah.
them.
So let's define consequence for a second. Most of the parents I work with define consequence as a punishment, something that is going to be extremely uncomfortable. It's going to be unpleasant, and hopefully that's going to be the driver of motivating change. My perspective on consequence or discipline is, what is it that you need to be taught and trained so that you can learn how to behave in a better way? To teach and train. That's the definition of discipline. So the consequence in kind of my mode that I operate from, I use this word, it's called reset. It's if you make a mistake, I say reset. If you correct the behavior, I give you direct feedback on what I saw that was evidence of you correcting the behavior. So that the energy, the connection, the teaching is how you took accountability and corrected it, as opposed to why did you do this? What did you do wrong? What can you do differently next time? Where I'm emphasizing and energizing all the problems that happen. And when kids hear the word reset, there's kind of a neutral emotion attached to that they know what reset means. Reset means just try it again. And anytime kids say, "Shut up, stupid, idiot, dumb," or they just have these outbursts and you say reset, in my experience, what happens is they catch themselves, they correct it, they get the credit for that, rather than having to go through some huge, you're grounded for a week, you got to tell me 10 positive things, don't ever talk like that again. Like, all that is just unnecessary drama, and it's actually confusing for kids.
Very confusing. So you've got your 5-year-old, you told them that, you said reset, and the kid looks at you and goes, "I don't have to do that. You're just my dad."
Yeah, it's a trap.
Then what do you do?
It's a trap. Again, when we talked about, kind of these emotions coming out sideways, it's a bid for connection. I guarantee you that kid knows that dad's going to have a response to that. We're going to engage in more conversation around my defiance and disrespect. But once you say reset, you totally unplug from them. You have no connection, no response. Most people say ignore negative behavior. That's kind of one of the ways that this might look. And as soon as they stop, you acknowledge them and say, "Hey, you stopped talking disrespectfully. You got your control back." And so let's move forward.
Yeah. So even with a young child, that would work. So you have your child who's acting out and asking for a lot of attention, and they're trying to connect in a negative way. Talk about the role of fun, affection, and healthy attention that parents can give a child, and how much will that affect the bad behavior in the future?
Yeah, so I have a 13, almost 14-year-old daughter that I am in the 7th grade was a complete crap storm.
Yeah.
And, she's gone through a lot. Is it okay if I share kind of like my experiences just as a father?
Of course.
Okay.
Absolutely. If she doesn't care, go for it.
So she's learning a lot about peer relationships at the middle school level and all the drama that's attached to it. And she's got connected with a really, really unhealthy group of kids. And she's made some really dumb decisions. If I didn't have 12 years of deep, healthy connection with her prior to that, our relationship would just be an absolute nightmare. But my thought with her over this last year, and she's just starting to come out of it now. It's so amazing to see where she's at now. But my framework with her is, I am going to continue to be intentional about loving you, connecting to you, spending quality time with you. I am not going to get sucked into this drama and let anxiety kind of rule our relationship, but I am going to hold you accountable because you were really, really unsafe and you need to learn. And what I found is, by being really steady with our relationship, is stronger than it's ever been when she's at her worst.
Wow.
And most of the time, when I talk to my friends about this, they're like, "What? You put up with that? Why are you yelling at her? I'd ground her for the rest of her life." I'm like, "Yeah, why don't you just kick her out of the house while you're at it?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And and to really trust that she has what it takes to learn from this, to make better decisions that are going to be in her best interest, and that she's going to come out on the up. Like having that belief at my core, kind of guiding how I connect to her. She's actually starting to manifest that right now. She's turning away bad people, or
well, and exactly. And there's a deep level of trust in you that, because I believe on some level, all kids doing stupid stuff in the 7th and 8th grade, acting out, hanging around with the wrong kids. They know better. They're doing it for who knows what reason, but they also know what's deep and meaningful and real, and what's steady in their life. And I think you had set yourself up to be that steady rock that you're going to fall backwards. And when you fall backwards, I'm here. I'm not going to go anywhere. So, act out as long as you want, but I'm just not going to go away. And I think that's hard for a lot of parents, because a child's bad behavior wears them down. They also believe their kid doesn't like them anymore. I've seen that particularly with dads. And so they just sort of back away. Talk about the difference in parenting, or the effect that a father has on a child in connection versus the effect a mother has on connection. Is there a difference? And if so, what is it?
yeah, that's a tough one. Because I see both of them so valuable, and there's such an overlap.
Of course.
I-
And I think, what I'm thinking is if many of us, not everybody, of course, look back in our lives. I know for me, my mom was this loving, wonderful person. I tell her anything. My dad was great, and I was close to my dad. But when he said something, he meant it. Now, my mother, even if it was positive or negative, my mother could tell me, "Oh, you look so nice. Oh, you're not fat. Oh, you're not fat. Oh, you're not fat." And I go, "Yeah, you have to say that because you're my mother." But if my dad would say it, all of a sudden it was kind of real. Do you see a difference in your practice between the way kids respond to their dad versus their mother? Or does it depend on the parent's personality?
Yeah, I would say both. It's interesting that you describe it that way, because I would say that's a really common thread with the families I work with, where dad's voice holds a little bit more authority or truth to it. It's not that mom isn't, she's being a pushover, she's not being honest. Maybe it's that kind of mother's innate nature is to be nurturing, where dad's is to be protective. And because you're in a position of protecting me, and I can kind of rest assured that you have my best interest, you have my back. Maybe that's what it is. But yeah, my kids respect my authority, or when I set a limit, a lot differently than when my wife does.
Yeah. And it's probably not better or worse.
I think that's the great, that's the benefit of having a mom and dad both in the home. That's God's design, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And one of the things, we only have a few minutes left, and I have about 25 other questions for you. But anyway, single moms and teen boys, and we have a lot of them out there. And I have seen teen boys become abusive towards their mothers, to the point where mothers say, I don't know. And yet I've also seen the other side, where if a dad is around, or, and he doesn't have to be doing a whole lot, there's less of that. Talk about teenage boys and the handling of behavior issues with a mother, a single mom, and a married mom, or a single dad and a married dad.
Yeah. So how would a young boy who's transitioning from childhood to adolescence to young adulthood to becoming a man, how would they learn how to do that in a healthy way without a male shepherding them? Right? So
I agree.
Yeah. So when you have the absence of that, how do you learn how to manage your aggression? How do you learn how to manage your intensity without a father or a male figure that's helping you when you step on the line, kind of bring you back, step on the line, bring you back? If you only have a mom and you don't have that male influence, when you start to step out of line and there's nobody bringing you back, you just keep going further and further out of line. Unfortunately, they have to learn a lot of times the way to get through to them is like they get in trouble with the law. Now the law is serving that.
Yep. So what you're saying is that there is a big difference in parenting and effect on kids between a mother and a father, because I think that our culture's trying to blur those lines. It doesn't matter as long as you have, a loving person in the home or 3 loving people or whatever. Yeah, that's important. But that kids really do see mom and dad differently, and they have very different effects.
And they both have two different things to offer. You know, what mom has to offer is different than what dad has to offer in the sense of raising a child or investing in a child.
Yep. And it's supposed to be that way. Last question. You talk to the couple out there, who mom is mostly the one who's with the kids, so maybe even the mom. And you have a couple of kids. You've got, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And they're fighting all the time. And the 10-year-old constantly picks on the younger kids. 3 things she needs to do because she's ready to lose her mind.
And when you said they're constantly fighting, the kids are fighting or the parents are fighting?
Kids. poking at each other, hitting each other. And it's always 2 at a time. They kind of rotate, these 2 and then these 2.
It's almost like they tag
they
tag and say, okay, your turn. I'm going to go sit this one out.
They tag you and then they're out. And the mother's just ready to pull her hair out. But there's always one who's the instigator, the bossy one. And I just see mothers ready to pull their hair out. So what are the first 3 places where she needs to start kind of turning the tide here? Because telling them no, stop it doesn't work. So if you could just sort of quickly talk her through that.
Proactively. Like, so what you're describing is what does she do? That's reactionary. Because the fighting's happening, what should I do to get the fighting to stop? So number 1, proactively, you have to be very intentional about pointing out when your kids are getting along. Unless you can train yourself to see that and create energy, connection around that, give a voice to that when it's happening, deep appreciation for it, anything else is going to be very, very superficial. So that's the first thing you have to do. So I would just be thinking like self-control, respect, kindness. Maybe those are the qualities that you really want to notice and energize proactively.
And yelling at them to be kind doesn't work.
No, it's yelling.
Be kind to yourself. It's terrible.
What I like to say is confront your kid with their greatness. Get animated about it. Man, there you are again. Your brothers are fighting. You're not getting involved. What's great self-control? You're being a leader. You're showing them, how to resist temptation. I can see your fist going like this, but you stopped.
Yeah.
Like what great self-control. The second thing you need to do is stop. Stop the drama. Stop telling them to stop. Stop repeating yourself. Stop raising your voice, because when you do that, it's like you're taking that conflict and you're throwing gasoline on it because now you're participating.
Oh yeah.
And
yes.
That's when I first learned about kind of this methodology or this approach, that your response right there is exactly what mine was. I was like, oh crap. I'm in schools lecturing kids, pulling them out. What did you do? What can you do different? I was given the best version of me with passion right after or during problems, which meant this is the time to connect with me. And I'm just making it worse. The third thing is you have to come up with some real clear expectations. Like if hitting your brother is a rule, you need to stop. The second they do that, there needs to be some accountability. You don't remind them. You don't give them a second chance. You don't lecture them. You don't raise your voice. All you're doing is saying, mom or dad is super, super in tune to your problem. So keep it up. But once I get frustrated enough, then I'll give you a problem or a consequence. So I'm really big at the second the line is crossed, there's an immediate accountability because they learn to respect that line.
No counting.
Oh, yeah, please don't.
Oh, but I did for years. You just do. You get so frustrated. Okay. Yeah. Well, this has been delightful, Dan. I am so grateful that you came on. My guest is Dan Peterson. How can people get hold of you, learn about what you do, and learn how to walk out exactly what you've been telling us this half hour?
Yeah. So first of all, I have like a 90-day coaching program to help parents learn and master a specific set of tools. So if that's something you'd be interested, just go to my website. It's the Compass for Life. It's the number 4.com. And actually what I'll do is I'll create a link just for your listeners. So the Compass for Life /Meeker. And just give me a little bit of information. I'll respond to you directly. We could set up a quick call or give you some more information. Other than that, I have free ebooks on my website. I got a couple videos for training purposes, but it's a really good hub for information for parents wanting to learn more.
When you do coaching, do you do it via Zoom? Do you have people come in?
Yeah,
via Zoom.
I actually, I'm in Illinois and I work with families in Cambodia and Hawaii. I got somebody in Germany.
Wow.
Yeah. So
nice.
I feel like I have a really good opportunity.
So clearly the advice you're giving works.
Yeah.
because if it didn't work, you wouldn't have a website anymore.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be in business. I'd still be working at a hospital.
You wouldn't be in business.
Well,
Dan, thank you so much for joining me. Your website again is
thecompassforlife.com.
And the 4 is as a number, not spelled out.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.